There was a stretch of Interstate 80 in Nebraska that feels like a wound in the earth. It is a flat, featureless void where the sky and the cornfields merge into a suffocating blackness. I was driving it at 3 a.m., the kind of hour where your mind begins to peel at the edges. My only company was the rhythmic thrum of tires on asphalt and the bitter, metallic taste of gas station coffee. I was alone. I had checked my back seat 3 times before leaving the last rest stop. It was filled with nothing but cardboard boxes and a heavy gray wool blanket. But as I passed under a flickering, orange-tinted highway light, I saw it. In the rearview mirror, sitting exactly in the center of the bench seat, was a shape. It was pale, whiter than bone, and perfectly still. I jerked my eyes back to the road, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "Highway hypnosis," I whispered, my voice sounding thin and alien in the cabin. I looked back at the mirror. Nothing. Just the dark, square silhouettes of my boxes. But then, the air changed. The heater was blasting at 80 degrees, yet I could see my breath blooming in the air like white smoke. A smell began to drift forward, the stench of a stagnant pond, of rotting vegetation and wet, matted fur. Click. The sound of the middle seatbelt buckling was deafening in the silence. My hands locked onto the steering wheel, my knuckles turning white. I refused to look. I knew that if I looked, I would be acknowledging it, and if I acknowledged it, it could touch me. Then came the sound, a wet, sliding noise, like a piece of raw meat being dragged across leather. It was leaning forward. I could hear its breath now, heavy, labored, and whistling through what sounded like a throat full of fluid. I felt a cold, damp pressure against the back of my neck. It wasn't a hand. It felt like a tongue, long, sandpaper rough, and freezing. A voice, wet and shredded, vibrated through the back of my seat. "Mark, why did you leave me in the ditch?" I don't know anyone who died in a ditch. I don't know how it knew my name. I slammed on the brakes, the tires screaming as the car spun 180 degrees. I grabbed my heavy mag light and swung it into the back with a guttural scream. The seat was empty. The boxes were undisturbed, but the wool blanket was soaking wet. I touched it, and my fingers came away stained with a thick black slime that smelled like death. I floored it, doing 110 miles per hour, sobbing as I drove. When I finally reached a populated area, I checked the window. On the inside of the glass, there were no handprints. Instead, there were marks of a face pressed against the glass, 2 hollow pits for eyes, and a jaw that looked like it had been unhinged. I sold that car the next day, but sometimes when I'm sitting on my sofa at home, I hear the distinct click of a seatbelt coming from the empty corner of the room.
The M6 in the UK is a lonely place after midnight, but there's one stretch near the Lake District that feels cursed. I was driving my hatchback, feeling like a small insect among the giants of the logistics world. That's when the black semi appeared. It didn't have headlights. It just materialized in my rear view, a wall of matte black steel that seemed to absorb the light from my own car. It didn't slow down. It surged forward until its grille was inches from my bumper. I could see the rivets in the metal, the splattered remains of thousands of insects, and a strange dark liquid dripping from its radiator. I moved to the left lane to let it pass. It followed. I moved back to the right. It swerved violently, its massive tires shrieking. I realized then that this wasn't a road rage incident. This was a hunt. I pushed my little car to its limit, the engine screaming at 6,000 RPMs. The truck stayed perfectly pinned to my bumper. I decided to try and see who was behind the wheel. I slowed down just enough for a streetlight to illuminate the truck's cab as we passed under it. The driver's side was empty. The steering wheel was thrashing back and forth on its own, like a living thing trying to break free from its column. But the passenger side, that's what haunts my dreams. Strapped into the seat was a figure. It looked like a man made of stitched-together leather. It had no hair, no ears, and its mouth was sewn shut with thick, rusted wire. As I looked, the thing's head snapped toward me. Its eyes were nothing but yellowed, cracked marbles. It began to thrash in its seat, slamming its head against the side window until the glass cracked. A spray of dark, oily blood hit the inside of its windshield. I took an illegal turn across the grass median, my car bottoming out as I flew onto the opposite side of the highway. I didn't stop until I found a police station. I was hysterical, screaming about a ghost truck. The officer took me to the back and showed me a file. Every 10 years, someone reports the black semi, he said, his face gray. In 1976, a driver went mad and sewed his own mouth shut before crashing into a family car. He was never found in the wreckage, but the truck keeps his route. I checked my car's GPS later that night. It had recorded a new home address. When I clicked it, it showed a satellite view of a scrapyard filled with rusted black trucks, and in the center of the yard, spelled out in human bones, were the words, "Run faster next time." The road was never on the map. It was a narrow vein of cracked pavement bleeding into the West Virginia mountains. My GPS had led me there, its voice becoming distorted and deep, whispering directions that made no sense. "Turn toward the screaming trees," it had said. I thought it was a glitch. I wish it had been. The milestones started appearing every mile. Small weathered pillars of gray stone. Milestone 1, milestone 2. They were covered in a thick, pulsating moss that looked like veins. By the time I reached milestone 12, the woods had gone silent. No crickets, no wind, just the sound of my own heart, which felt too loud in the cabin. I drove for miles, but the next stone I saw said milestone 12. I stopped. I walked to the stone, the air tasting like copper and old blood. I took my pocket knife and carved a deep, jagged X into the top of the pillar. I watched the stone bleed. A thick, red sap oozed from the cut. I got back in and drove. 1 mile later, milestone 12, with my X still fresh and weeping red sap. I tried to turn around, but the road behind me was gone. Where the pavement had been, there was now only a wall of towering gray trees with bark that looked like stretched skin. I was trapped on a 1-mile loop of hell. I drove that mile 100 times, 1,000 times. The sun never rose, the moon never moved. On the 500th loop, I saw a figure standing by milestone 12. It was me.
but it was a version of me that had been there for centuries. Its clothes were rags, its skin was translucent, showing the black veins beneath. It was holding a red marker, staring at the stone with eyes that had been eaten away by birds. As I drove past, the other me looked up. It didn't scream, it just opened its mouth, and a swarm of black moths flew out, coating my windshield in a layer of dusty, choking wings. I crashed. I woke up standing by the stone. I was holding the marker. I looked down the road and saw the headlights of a car approaching. My car. I saw my own terrified face behind the glass. I wanted to warn him. I wanted to tell him to never stop. But as the car passed, I realized I couldn't speak. My tongue had turned into a thick gray root, anchoring me to the stone. I am milestone 13, and I'm waiting for you to take my place.
That's the end of tonight's stories. If any of them stayed with you, you know which one. Let me know in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, subscribe. I'll see you soon.